What is up, everybody? Welcome to the Halftime Snacks podcast. This show features short interviews that you can listen during the halftime of your favorite sports events. Every Tuesday, I host fun conversations with talented people in the sports industry, where we'll learn from their stories, knowledge, and experiences. So go grab your favorite snack and come snack with us. Are you ready? Let's go! Joining us now is a serial entrepreneur who spent his last 15 years building solutions with technology for diverse industries and is now taking on the sports industry as well. He's the co-founder and CEO of Pickup, an incentivized fan engagement platform that lies at the intersection of sports media and betting. Pickup transforms content into interactive experiences that delivers insights and revelations about their partner businesses. Their mission is to validate the fan's opinion and in the process make sports content way more fun. So this episode is going to be packed with lessons on product development, partnerships, sports marketing, and more. So go grab some snacks and join me in my conversation with the legend, Dan Healy. Dan, welcome to the Halftime Snacks. How are you?
What's up, Ronan? Thanks for having me. Good to spend some time with you.
The pleasure is mine. Thank you for taking the invitation. Let's kick it off with a fun icebreaker. The one I have for you is, what is something you were known for in college or high school? What was something you were known for?
Ooh, I was hoping to be a sports moment like like one of your former episodes. What was I known for? One of the things I was really known for was I've always kind of been known for bringing people together, bringing awesome people together, getting them together to have a good time, to do good stuff, build great things. Back in high school and college, it was more to get people together and have a good time. But that has progressed. So yeah, I love bringing a force of amazing people together to do great stuff.
That's awesome. That's probably also how fans who want to be engaged with their teams also think about Pickup. We're going to get into that, but maybe let's jump right into Pickup and fans' opinions, because that's something that you guys talk a lot about. And I want to ask you, maybe first of all, let's start with this question: why are fans' opinions important to create engagement?
That's a great question. We've kind of tracked this evolution over the last 4 years of building the company, right? Where it's table stakes now to get the data points that come from social media and that come from all of these accessible kind of metrics, I guess is the best way to put it. We believe that if you can truly understand how the fan feels, right? If we can understand how the fan feels, in a deeper way than anyone else, then we can provide this immense amount of value. And understanding how the fan feels requires you to extract relevant data, to provide them with an actionable data point, some sort of form of engagement, which we tend to lean into SMS for, right? And make it a very intimate experience where it's personalized and makes them kind of like delights them. And so we believe all of that originates with the fan opinion, because the fan opinion is what is formed when they're engaging with the sports teams and players they love.
Yeah, but there's something that in my mind that comes up very, very easily, which I'm sure that many people in the audience will share with me. And that when they think about like fan opinion, they immediately think about like Twitter, the whole like discussion around a thread of what's going on a specific game or stuff. We all can think about all the trolls out there who are just playing around and trying to make jokes of other teams, of other players. So there's a lot of like noise in the whole like opinion space in sports. So I'm wondering, like, how exactly do you filter out that noise to be able to come up with like some insightful takeaways from their opinions?
Yeah. Okay. So that's a really interesting question and a really interesting way of looking at it. You're right. There's a lot of trolling, especially on social platforms, right? People putting memes out there and gifs out there just to drive interaction. I think part of it is the source, right? Where you're actually aggregating it, right? So if it's actually on a league site or a team site, then you tend to get a more authentic fan, somebody who's a little bit more intimately involved, as opposed to somebody
Hmm.
who grabs like the Luca and Booker meme from last night.
Yeah.
So I think the source is incredibly important, but I think also the quality of the question, right? If you can get a level deeper, if you can extract what we think about as like making headlines playable, right? Headlines are great; they get you thinking, and there have been media businesses that have built companies just around headlines for clickbait reasons. But if you then take that headline, turn it into a contextually relevant question, and encourage people to engage with it, you can start to extract a lot of really intriguing and interesting information. When we get to the two-way communication piece, right? When we re-engage that fan because we know who they are from a phone number perspective, at least we have that. We have their location more often than not, so we have an idea of what they're interested in, and then we know what they've made a pick on. We can start to send them more questions that we think that they will participate in. And the feedback and the contextual data points that you get from what people will actually text into you really allows you to understand the fan in a very different way. And it's pretty authentic.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned how it's all about maybe the question and the way you ask it that makes you extract higher level information. That's something that I also realized when I was, early on when I started podcasting, how like the different way you kind of like, it's like the better you not only frame and put some context around the question, but also like the more specific and direct the question is, you're gonna be able to extract better answers from the guests. So I love how there's commonalities in that. But who really came up with the first iteration of the idea? Was that the original idea, or was there something different? Like, how exactly did that came about?
Yeah, no, the original idea came up, about 4 years ago, and it came off the back of PASPA being repealed. What we were there were the way that we were thinking about it in the early days was really around how the American sports betting market would want to engage with questions. And it always came back to regional, or it came back to hyper local. It came back to communities around teams. People always like come together around a team, a player, an event, something super relevant. And the first iteration was actually called My Parlay. And this has taken me way back. And the idea behind it was you would present somebody with 5 questions that were relevant. Let's say you're in Cleveland, right? And you get 5 questions about Cleveland sports that day. And you would pick 3 of them. You would answer them. They would be very headline centric. Who's going to start? Will the pitcher go more than 7 innings? Will there be a home run today? Whatever they're talking about at that time. It was will Lindor continue his hit streak? Something like that. And if you got all 3 right, then you got bonus points. And the bonus points, it was like a super bonus, and the super bonus was essentially hitting a parlay. So we've always done this interesting thing of extracting headlines, using gamification in the form of sports betting, and then trying to almost like train or educate people on some of the fun mechanics that exist in the world of sports betting that was never really legal or accessible, at least not in a public way in the U.S.
When was the first time that this occurred to you, or what years are we talking about?
Yeah, we're talking about late into 17, early into 18 is when this really started to emerge. The concept of trying to gamify and bring communities together around sports is something I've always thought about, just because I've lived in so many different places, and sports are usually the commonality, the thing that can bring you into an environment that maybe you're not so comfortable in. But the idea of creating a platform to really power content, the idea of making all of these touch points interactive and utilizing data to enhance the fan experience, that came to fruition over the course of 2018, 2019.
Yeah, and it makes a lot of sense now thinking about it, because those were already the years where the digital fan experience was starting to be taken more seriously than just the live experience, right? There's a lot of discussion of how that is evolving and where we're going with that. And I think that your platform is a really great example of how it can really create. We can really create that experience there with different like bonus points and experiences, as you were talking. And we're going to talk a little bit more about those. But one of the things that maybe catches the eye about you guys is that you guys work with NASCAR. So maybe I wanna ask. I'm super curious to ask, like, what's the story behind that partnership, or how that happened. So maybe you want to share that with us.
Yeah, so the team over there is fantastic, and we had the ability or the opportunity to meet them in person, over multiple touch points while we were kind of like working on the deal. And what we learned over and over, and what we continued to hear them say, was their objective is to grow the sport, to grow NASCAR the sport through sports betting, and they've got a really talented group of people that are behind that. Joe Solosky being the primary, and so when we explained to them that what we're doing is we're really setting ourselves up to engage every fan, regardless of whether or not they're in a betting state or in a legal betting state, or if they're interested in sports betting. But we can start to really understand the fans, what they care about, what they're interested in, what they want to make picks on, and we can also help facilitate kind of the relationships with some of the operators that they work with to try and introduce people to formal sports betting. It was just a logical partnership for everybody. And so that's where it originated, and we've had the ability and opportunity to work with them this season. And what we see is it's an incredible fan base. It's a group of people that want to engage, right? And sports betting is a really cool way to do that. And they continue to grow their portion of the handle across the operators. And they're experimenting and they're learning every day, and it's showing.
Yeah, and I'm very curious to ask, like, because NASCAR is a big brand in sports, and it's one of the many. You work with over 150 publishers, and you have many relevant brands out there like FloSports, Comcast. What is it like to work with them from an operational standpoint? And I ask this because I want to know, like, what type of feedback loops exist between you and those brands that I'm sure they have, like this branding strategy behind everything that they do, that they want to be very careful in how they approach things, so that they working with you could be super interesting experience. So I maybe want to ask, like, how do you feel it is working with big brands like those, in terms of what type of feedback loops they're looking for?
Yeah, it's I think every group is different. Just based on kind of how they're organized and how they're set up. We've been fortunate to work with some really great partners. It helps that, there's buy-in from top organizations more often than not. But when we work with them, the thing that we're really trying to help people understand is that asking the right questions and getting your fans to interact with the content that you are investing heavily in can, in a lot of cases, deliver revelations, right? Not just insights, but revelations that are surprisingly obvious, that you might not see unless you ask, right? Which is interesting for us. And so what we try to do is we try to package up the data and deliver it back to them to show the value that we are providing in two ways. One are the metrics themselves, right? How many picks are people making? How many new users are in the community? What are the click-through rates? And the click-through rates on SMS are fantastic. They go up to 67% in some cases. More often than not, they're in like the 25 to 30% range. And then on top of that, what are some of the things people are saying? Like, what are they actually saying that could help change your messaging or help you highlight a certain individual, player, athlete, driver, or shift your content strategy to focus more on lists of questions and headlines as opposed to like full bore articles, because those get more engagement. And the technology and the relationship that we have with them, it does on a regular basis deliver those revelations in a pretty intriguing way.
And I'm curious about something that's called the benefit of the doubt, and that is how much of to what extent can you trust the answers that you receive on the platform to those revelations that you're talking about? Like, how much of you guys have that segmented? The reason why I ask this is because maybe you remember going back to shows like The Voice or The X Factor, where Eurovision, that sometimes fans get to vote on who they thought was the best performing, and so that influences in an extent what's going to be the result. Although there's like a few experts on those events, that they are the ones that maybe have the highest weight on terms of like what really is the verdict in a way. So I wonder like how to what extent do you have like experts on the platform, or to what extent can you trust the answers given from fans to deliver those insights or revelations, as you mentioned them, to the partners and other businesses?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at it in the form of the leagues or the publishers or the teams, right, they are the experts, and we will never know more about NASCAR than NASCAR knows about NASCAR. We hope that we can know more about the fans, about the people that watch NASCAR. We know more about them than anyone else. That's kind of the hope. And so it's less about trying to push everything that we learn over the finish line so that it can in some way, shape, or form be utilized and kind of like reshape their marketing approach or anything like that. It's more about getting these nuggets, these surprisingly obvious revelations, and delivering them, and then hopefully working with them in a relationship that's based on authentic trust, right? Where they do like trust us or depend on us to test them out. And if they test them out and they say, hey, you're right, then why not roll it out? Because the experts ultimately make the decision, but the power of the fans can absolutely define your roadmap.
And can you share maybe your favorite example of that obvious revelation that wasn't as obvious, or some experience that happened with one of your partners that were like, this is actually the value of our platform? Is there one example that, or one story that you could share with us?
I think one example is, with one of our partners, they've been pushing kind of like a matchup type wager, and it's been really really a focus of theirs, something that is going really really well. When we were talking to the fans and we were learning from the fans, what we recognized was that they understood the language of head to head in a little bit more of a clear fashion than matchup. And so we were able to introduce some questions that talked about head to head, and it from a percentage perspective drove engagement up significantly. And that's just a very simple and it's surprisingly obvious, right? But it's to an extent a revelation.
So do you think there's like millions of very simple subtleties out there that just teams, leagues, or just businesses are not realizing, that in maybe just changing one word, they could, increase engagement and stuff? Is that something that you've seen many, many times?
Yeah, completely. Or the way that something is presented, or the way that something is delivered, putting content or engaging content at the top of the article versus burying it in the bottom. I mean, it's all of these little things, or I'm sure you learn all the time, right, on the podcast, like how should you start it, right? Like what should the introduction be? I bet that if you didn't do the icebreaker, then you would have a little bit of trouble warming up the guests. Right. It was surprisingly obvious that, like, hey, this is something everybody who does presentations or groupthink exercises does. They do an icebreaker. Do it on the beginning of the podcast. You break me down a little bit. We're level. Now let's go. Have a conversation, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the way I visualize this is like the whole architecture of content and how that engages with people. And I think it's fascinating, and I want to maybe talk a little bit more about that, which is something that I call the engagement economy, right? It's just about how people really enjoy or value differently this architecture that we're talking about. How do you really see the platform evolving in sports betting and other areas of sports? In other words, what is your vision for pickup?
That's an awesome question. And the engagement economy is interesting. We should dive a little bit deeper into that. I want to understand how you think about that. I can say that, there's two primary beliefs that we have, right? So there are a number of them, but in this capacity, we believe that the future of sports relies heavily on anticipating, understanding, and unleashing what turns fans on, right? Like we believe that if we rely on the future of sports relies on anticipating, understanding, and unleashing what turns fans on, which means you have to understand their feelings, not just the data, not just what they click on, not just what they engage with, but really what gets them going, right? And we also believe that in the world that we're living in, especially as it relates to sports betting, that the race to the top, because I'm sure that tracking the space, you're seeing that it's absolutely a full-on race, right? And we've seen that through acquisition. But we believe the race to the top will be won by creating fan loyalty beyond reason. And when we say fan loyalty beyond reason, there's something bigger than wearing a jersey. There's something bigger than wearing a hat or buying a ticket. There's something like inherent in the fan where I will never not be a Sonics fan, right? They don't even exist anymore. And I still think about that team that I grew up with, that was a part of me, that I went to games with my dad, and I played on, on the Sega Genesis way back in the day, right? Like if we can get, if we can extract fan loyalty beyond reason, then we can help people win that race on the loyalty.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned, well, of course, my opinion on the engagement economy is, I feel like engagement is really about caring about what other people feel and what their opinion is, in a way. So thinking about this like a little bit in a more abstract way is about like figuring out if someone's comfortable predicting or making specific conclusions on the difference between what they expected and what's the reality. So for instance, okay, there's the prediction, there's this prediction game, right? You're going to have a flight with Delta or with any company, and you expect this to be a great flight that's not going to be delayed, that's going to have enough space between seats. I'm just guessing here, but you have this expectation, and then when you fly and then you realize that this was a shitty experience or something, you have that difference in your expectation between your reality, and that becomes your opinion. Like, that was a bad flight, right? If the experience then exceeds your expectation, then you have a positive opinion. Now, the engagement economy is those companies that actually care about that difference between expectation and reality. So maybe I went a little bit too abstract, but in sports it happens a lot because you always get to predict what's going to happen, right? You have an expectation about your favorite NASCAR driver, or you have an expectation about the specific team or sport that you're always predicting, right? So you can see that predicting element becomes very, very interesting in the engagement economy. So I'm wondering, like, how, if you think that pickup could really create value in other types of prediction markets outside of sports. And the ones that I'm thinking about super quickly could be experiences, right? But it could also be, say, capital markets, say stocks, say derivatives, say what's going to happen eventually with Apple stock in 3 months, right? That's also an expectation that it's based on like assumptions that people have about things, and then just the result of that difference is what I call the engagement economy. Like how others are how much are others interested in that opinion. So do you see it evolving in like other areas of engagement?
Super interesting. And this can lead us on an abstract path, but it's kind of fun. So I think the one thing that you're missing kind of in that example is, let's use the Delta flight because it is so abstract. I think it's going to be a great flight, but I get on the flight and, there's an empty seat next to me, and then, somebody sits down and they fall asleep on my shoulder. They're snoring, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm like, oh, it's terrible. Or my TV doesn't work or something, and it's a cross-country flight. And so all of a sudden, my opinion has changed. Now, what if you introduce the community aspect of that, meaning that you're hearing opinions from other people? Maybe somebody, their seat didn't recline and their TV didn't work, and the person next to them, fell asleep on their shoulder and all this other stuff. Then relative to the rest of the community, or at least the community that I'm engaged with, maybe it wasn't so bad. And so like the opinion I think the engagement economy, it begins with your actual experience. It's measured in the opinion that you have, and then that opinion is gauged or vetted against the opinions of all of these other people. So you put down, let's say you make 5 bets across a college football Saturday or something like that, and you're like, oh man, I took this terrible beat because this running back was pulled halfway through the game, and he didn't cover the over on yards, and this team lost because they gave up an interception right when they should have just taken a knee or run the ball. That's cool, except for the guy who is like, I just went 0 for 5 because I took home underdogs and I missed every single bet. Now, how do you really feel about your day? You won 3, you missed 2. It wasn't so bad, right? And so your opinion shifts based on the community of people that you surround yourself with. And we do try and connect those dots. We try and kind of be the lifeblood between those communities.
That's super interesting, and I think that there's also value in that. Although I would say that in by asking better questions, coming back maybe to the flight on Delta, maybe not asking about like did someone slept on your shoulder, because that's gonna be super subjective, right? But maybe in a more abstract way, like would you rate your experience as something that I don't know, that could be recommendable or something? Like I don't know, I cannot think about like the question, but I do think that there's value in just learning how to extract the feedback that it's important from the clients, customers, or just people engaging with your content or with your experiences. I do think that there's this good element that you guys already kind of like figured out on just making the right question, but also like putting it in the places where people are more likely to engage. Because going back maybe to the Delta example, yeah, we all get the like customer feedback form, but how many of us really actually engage with it, right? So that's where I do see that maybe there's value from what Pickups knows how to do in like different segments of like the economy.
Well, yeah, I mean, what if you just ask them how they feel, right?
Yeah.
Because, maybe you had a bad flight, but what mattered and what was in the control of Delta was that the flight took off and you arrived on time. It was safe. Your luggage was there. How do you feel? I feel good, right? I feel okay. That's fine. That's good to understand. That's good to know. Understanding how people feel is a much deeper level than giving them the ability to say, I'm pissed off because this person fell asleep next to me. It's a 1 out of 5. How do you feel? I feel fine, right? Or I feel good, or I feel great, I feel excellent. So
no, it's a super interesting discussion, and I think that we would need another halftime snack to get on with different questions and discussions. But we'll leave that for next time. Of course, Dan, you're always welcome to come back. Before we go, we always wrap it up with some personal question, and the one I have for you is, what is your proudest accomplishment, Dan?
It's a great question. I think on the professional side of things, I think surrounding myself with an incredible team in this new company of advisors, investors, and the folks that work for us is something I'm incredibly proud of. On the personal front, it's my kids. They're awesome. They're the future. They're everything. So those are the 2 things I'm most proud of today, if that's not too big of a cop out.
Thank you very much for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, hit the subscribe button and leave a review on Apple Podcasts. If you enjoy learning about the business and technology behind sports, make sure you subscribe to the Sports Tech Biz newsletter. I'll leave the link in the show notes. See you all next week. Bye-bye.